in theory. You're live.
Brothers and sisters, we're so glad to have you all tonight for Action for Equity's third annual town hall. We do want to apologize for our late start. Just been trying to get ourselves together technologically. We're all very familiar, of course, with that thing in these days. But we've got a very important bit of information to share with you tonight on the progress that Action for Equity has made, even in the midst of this difficult pandemic season, and where we are going as we move forward. And so we're going to get right into it tonight. I am Paul Robeson Ford, chair of the board of Action for Equity. You're going to hear from other staff and board members, and mostly from our allies and partners around the community as we move through this evening. So thank you again for joining us. Do want to let you know that we are working on getting this webinar live on Facebook as well. So if you have folks who are looking for that, just encourage them to be patient. But with that, we are going to have a short video presentation from Misha James, who is one of our parents and community leaders. And Kenneth, if you can cue that up right now.
I'm Misha of Makai'sMom.com, and I just finished hosting the weekly Our Kijiji vlog, where Kijiji stands for a village in Swahili. I shared the space with my son, a few of his fellow classmates and football teammates, all students at Mount Tabor High School. I am a 1999 alumna of Mount Tabor High and wearing my all-in Spartan football t-shirt. We all know about the tragic events that happened on that campus. And if you're anything like me, you're not surprised. The writing's been on the wall. And if you're anything like me, you're frustrated, angry, and tired. You've been asking for mental health resources. You've been asking for a culturally affirming education. You've been asking for parent engagement. As we think about the things we want to gain from this town hall, I encourage you to not become weary in your well-doing. Our children are watching us. They need us. Our community needs us. This is our community. These are our children, and this is our time to lead. Don't give up. Y'all be vigilant, be careful, and I pray y'all stay well.
Amen. Amen. That is a wonderful way to get us started as we continue to keep all of the affected families in our prayers over at Mount Tabor, as well as the family of the alleged perpetrator here as well. There is only one, Nikita Renee McDaniel, and she is doing tremendous work here, most recently around women's gun violence prevention efforts, and that's really kind of building on work she has been doing for years. So we are going to move on to hearing from her on the subject of people power and the strength of family organizing. Nikita, we're so glad to have you here tonight.
Thank you for having me, Reverend Ford, and everybody here. I'm just delighted to be here. And I told Kelly earlier, like, wow, this is the third annual town hall. Like, what an accomplishment, and something to be celebrated. So why do we do this work of family organizing? First of all, family organizing builds people power that first strengthens our families and our communities before we can even go out and do this work. It begins to build on and strengthen our families, our children, and our community. And that is what is central to what we need as we move forward to do the work to impact policies that unfortunately have left our community in somewhat of an array. Community organizing is a long-term effort, and it actually connects people beyond the issues. it builds solidarity, and it helps us to find the power to impact these policies that affect our lives in ways that determine the future of our children and our grandchildren. It determines the future of our parents, our grandparents, our aunties, our uncles. So because of that, it's important that all of the people are involved. And it's very important and central to making sure that there are policies that are just for our children and our families moving forward. I will leave us with, don't get me preaching tonight, but I really want us to think about how family organizing actually breaks down barriers as well to the participation of people in community. Because when it's one person or just a few people doing something, the work is heavy on us. But the more that we include our families and we include their voices, we see that the load is not that heavy because everyone is doing their part. And I am so excited and delighted about the work that's taking place in Winston-Salem and how Action for Equity is leading the way with all of our wonderful partners. And I just am excited to be here tonight. And I want to encourage everybody to continue to move forward together because we are making an impact together. And community organizing is something we'll be doing for a while. So we should get together and learn to love on each other as much as we can. Thank you.
Amen, Nikita. Thank you so much. And thank you for your passion and the way in which you are moving through this community. We are having some trouble getting this thing live on Facebook. So if folks are reaching out to you about that, encourage them to come on in through the webinar links that we have out there so that they can participate in this. We do see the numbers going up of our participants, and we're glad about that. Janice Ramirez is one of our newest board members, a bright star who has made so many contributions already to the work of Action for Equity. She was unable to be with us this evening. So I am going to, in a very inadequate way, no doubt, try to pinch hit for her relative to not just the issue of Leandro, but really following up on what Sister Nikita just shared with you, because you're going to be hearing a lot tonight about family organizing. You're going to be hearing about Forsyth family power. You're going to be hearing about parent engagement. We've heard the saying many years ago that many hands make light work. And this is really what we are looking at as we think about family organizing. It's really astonishing when you consider how far and how fast Action for Equity has come in 3 years. When we got started making the shift from solely focusing on the situation with the Ashley School to looking at the wider and deeper issues of inequity that affected all of our schools in Forsyth County, there were few of us who imagined that we would be at this point so quickly in terms of the reach that we have, in terms of the ways in which we are being called upon as an organization to partner in related work, and to see how we have moved in terms of a wider spread level of accountability that is going on here, not just in the county, but in the state. That's what the Leandro case is about. And if you're not familiar with the Leandro case, if this is the first time you're hearing of the Leandro case, we encourage you to go to everychildnc.org. And Mary Pat or Kenneth, if you could put that in the public chat room, everychildnc.org, and familiarize yourself with the case and with their listed countdown to compliance. The Leandro case indicted the North Carolina State Legislature for failing to fully fund the schools of North Carolina according to what is dictated in our state constitution. It is a game-changing case, and it is a case that has now been picked up by a judge who has made it clear to the North Carolina State Legislature that they must be accountable for fulfilling the constitutional demand in order to make sure that every student in this state has access to a quality education. Now, what we already know, unsurprisingly, is that the legislature is pushing back, saying the usual things that lawmakers say when they don't want to take responsibility for what they haven't done. The judge is overstepping his bounds. We did this, we did that, we couldn't do the other. Well, the bottom line is none of those can be excuses that we accept. October 18th is the deadline for a hearing that has been called by the judge in terms of the legislature coming forward with a plan to fully fund our schools in the state of North Carolina. And so we need everybody here tonight to not only familiarize themselves with the Leandro case, but also to put pressure on your local state representative, state senator, to make sure that they are doing what they need to be doing to put up and find the resources that will actually allow us to come into compliance with the state constitution and do right by our students. As we move forward this evening, you hear more about family organizing, you hear more about parent engagement. What you're going to be hearing is a shift that we are making that is a natural outgrowth of what anchors us in our mission, which is a simple belief that the power is always in the hands of the people. And it's simply about mobilizing the people, working with and for the people, so that that power can be fully manifested. We're not talking about rehearsing the same old models that in some ways have fallen short of the goals we wanted to reach. We are talking about deep grassroots engagement with our families so that they can be active as informed advocates for their children and for our community. So this is what is at stake tonight. The Leandro case makes it plain. The family organizing plan that we are leaning in hard to in the coming months and year is what we believe will make the difference in carrying us even further than we have gone. I want to ask Christina Reed now to come on. My dream of a liberated education. I believe she's one of our Forsyth County students, right? That she sure is. 8th grade student. Christina, go ahead, my dear.
Hello. Hello, my name's Christina. I'm in the 8th grade, and my dream school would be to have more diversity in my class. It has come a long way since I can count how many African Americans are in my class. I go to a predominantly white school, but the crazy thing is for all 13 years, I have never had a Black teacher. In my dream school, I would like to have more races in my classes. I see the same 15 students out of 200 8th graders every day. We look different to people. It feels like we're watched and we don't fit in. In addition, how the teachers watch us more closely than others, how we are the ones who are always too loud. There are only 4 African American teachers at my school out of at least 50. This is quite disturbing. Furthermore, I would like to learn about different subjects. I love learning, but we don't learn about a lot of Black history. Only time we focus on Black history is in February. February is a National Black History Month, as well as we don't learn stuff that we're really going to need in the future, like taxes, credit, and management, and many more. I would love to do a stocks class where we go more in depth about stocks and making money for yourself. I wish we could express ourselves and go more in depth in school, because we have amazing ideas that are not spoken up because we are too scared. If we say something, we'll get a bad grade, or if we say something, we'll end up in the principal's office. I hope that we talk about more Black history and it's spoken up more. And I wish more diversity as well as more resources in the classroom. That would be the most perfect school in my eyes. Thank you for your time.
Christina, thank you so much for those powerful comments and sharing your dream of a liberated education and what it looks like. One of our newest staff members, who I affectionately know is Pretty Ricky Johnson, who has come on to assist us with our organizing and specifically with pushing forward Forsyth Family Power. He is going to come right now and share with you what some of the nuts and bolts are for Forsyth Family Power and what the values are and the bold vision that is pushing it forward. Pretty Ricky, go ahead.
I'm not that pretty. Good evening, everybody. I am, as Reverend Ford stated, Ricky Johnson. I serve as Director of Policy and Outreach for Action for Equity. And I'll go in a little bit about Forsyth Family Power, which is our think tank that we're developing and will officially launch on in the end of October. So first and foremost, two of the major and important details and important points that are drenched in the work of Forsyth Family Power, what Sister Nikita touched on earlier, is family organizing and building people power, as Reverend Ford said, and as the Black Panther Party would all say, the power is in the people. So we want to work specifically, not through the community, we want to work with the community in order to intentionally gain a collective voice. And that's not to say that everybody that wants to come in and work with Forsyth Family Power has to believe the same thing or have the same thoughts, because we know everybody has their own lived experience, and they bring in some type of knowledge that can benefit us. So it's not a one-size-fits-all type of thing. If you want to join, we welcome you. We have a few different caucuses that push for different issues that I think a lot of people could fit into, or not to say fit into, but join and help us push cause. The second thing that we're really big on is systems change. So one thing that we know for sure, and that we know for certain, is that we have to push for systemic solutions, because we know that that is what systemic problems require. You can't solve systemic problems without creating systemic solutions. That's what we want to do with Forsyth Family Power. We also know that systems, of course, they don't change themselves. And we also know that they seek to maintain themselves. So the status quo is not going to change if it's not challenged. And one thing we want to do with Forsyth Family Power is to challenge the status quo, and in the words of the great Malcolm X, by any means necessary, strategically. So our vision is a community where each student is emotionally and physically healthy, safe, engaged, supported, and challenged. Our mission is to navigate with families, as I stated earlier, through collaboration, seeking out the research and the information, advocacy to achieve true systems, change that'll result in justice. Go to the next slide, Penny. Okay, so our values and principles, as I mentioned, the first is we want true systems change, and that's going to take sometimes conflict, which we don't avoid at all, because to change systems, you have to shake it up sometimes. So we do not avoid. we don't mind flipping over tables if need be. The second point is the model that we use. It's the whole school, whole community, whole child model, which pretty much in a nutshell is us enforcing the community and the school system to understand that in order to understand the whole child, you have to understand the communities that they come from and how they intertwine with each other. Third, equity, inclusion, and justice. We really want to push that in its true sense, because some of those words have been started to be used as buzzwords. And we don't want to operate that way. We want to really push for equity, inclusion, and justice for our Black and brown kids. We want to move from an assets-based approach to focus on the strengths of our students. We don't want to move from a deficit perspective that automatically puts our Black and brown children in a negative light. Next, we want to push a safe, non-judgmental space where voices are heard and listened to. One thing that we avoid is to say that our community doesn't have a voice, versus understanding that our community and our voices have been systematically silenced purposely. So we want to make sure through Forsyth Family Power that these Black and brown voices are heard. We want to move from a growth mindset, because if we don't believe that our children can grow and perform in the school system, they won't. So we have to push that. Next, we want transparency and accountability. That's a two-way street, especially with accountability. But we need to be transparent in how we move and hold the school system and the community, the parents and ourselves accountable if we want to grow and move our students. Next, authenticity. A lot of people can fake it till they make it. We don't want to move that way. We want you to know that we're moving from an authentic place, and we want to show that in our actions. Lastly, one thing that a lot of elected officials or systems like to push all the time is, what does the data say? What does the data say? We want to use that data to drive our voice. They can try to dismiss or silence, as I spoke to earlier, our voices, but what they can't openly dismiss is the data that we present with our voices. Go to the next slide for me. And this is my last slide, but this is important for us to understand when it comes to Forsyth Family Power. So we know we are entrenched in second generational work, equity work. We know we stand on the shoulders of giants like the late great Dr. Eversley, Dr. Mendez, some of the other elders that are still alive that challenge us to know that this work has been done. So it's not like we want to push that we are the first to do this work. We understand that we're not. We want to get the torch and continue the work, because at the end of the day, it's better that we work together, because at the end of the day, the work needs to be done. It makes no sense for us to both be in a burning house and stop and argue. Both of us are going to burn. Next, we want to push for interventions that are rooted in systemic changes, as I mentioned earlier, and we want to purposely avoid Band-Aid fixes, because at the end of the day, you can't put a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound and expect it to heal. It's just not logical. Next, as I mentioned earlier, we want to, and we purposely are going to center the voices of Black and brown parents. We'll train them as researchers, and we're going to push as much as we can to, again, push for systemic and political and social changes when it comes to our Black students and the Black community. And lastly, we are intentional about addressing and identify the root causes of the issue, the systemic issues specifically, whether it be called out racism, classism, whatever the case might be. We are going to name it, because if you don't, it won't get addressed. And that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Brother Ricky, you better wear a big blue bow tie every time you come on and do a presentation, man, because you hit that one out the park. Amen. Thank you, Brother Ricky. That's why we brought him on. We tried to create a team of leaders and doers pushing the movement forward. Dr. Danny Parker Moore is going to come on right now. She is one of our partners coming out of Wake Forest University, and talk about culturally affirming parent engagement, which is key to this work. Dr. Parker Moore, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I hope people are doing well, and I'm glad that we can be in community this evening. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Freedom School, the overall model that the Children's Defense Fund has provided for us, and we have been doing in Winston-Salem for several years now. And so Freedom School is a program that has 5 essential components: high quality academic enrichment, social action and civic engagement, intergenerational servant leadership development, nutrition, health and mental health, parent and family involvement. So the last part is really what we're concerned about this evening. My colleague Allison Legary and I conducted a study in which we called the Freedom School Way, caregiver-driven efficacy in navigating schools. And what we found really is that parents were using Freedom School as a way to leverage what was there to be able to supplement their child's learning. Some parents voice that Freedom School was an opportunity for them to be able to have culture and be able to be around their peers and have an opportunity for them to be more engaged. Now, a part of Freedom School really is a lot of child focused efforts, but a huge part of it is parent focused. We have weekly parent meetings, and in those meetings, they are parent driven. Parents ask for what they would like to have in those meetings. Some of the meetings have been where other moms have led the meetings and voiced how they navigate the schools. The moms have often decided that they would work together if you needed someone to go into school with you as a place that could be intimidating, that you would have a partner there. We also had presentations where mothers were they had other Black women leading that were showing how to do self-care practices. And that was the one workshop that parents loved the most. And in our data, parents shared that that workshop gave them permission to be focused on themselves. And sometimes as moms, we do not do enough self-care. And so that was one of the things that came out of that. So for years now, we've had different things that have come out of those Freedom School parent meetings. One thing that, with this program being around for several years now, something that changed this past summer, we've had a meeting with the school district and the equity office. They came to us as a site and asked for a parent meeting. So we had a Zoom meeting very similar to this. We broke out into groups and parents got to express what some of their hopes and wishes were for their children in the district, some of the things that they love about the district and school choice, and how school choice was working for them or how it wasn't working for them. And so this is really a part of what Freedom School and the Children's Defense Fund really find, is that parents, caregivers, they are in charge of knowing what's best for their children, and that it comes at the understanding that parents really want the best, right, for their kids. And so most of the time, school literature and school data will not always leverage parents as the resources that they are. And I believe that the Freedom School model really does a good job of that. Parents are also really engaged by deciding that by enrolling their child in this, that they are going to find ways to figure out what are some different things that they could be supplementing the education. Each year, a survey is given out, and parents indicate on that survey that more than 90% of the parents surveyed reported that they see positive changes in their children's social and academic confidence. Also, more than 90% of parents express a willingness to participate in social action and assist with their children's schoolwork. And then our survey also asked parents things like, they express that they are more likely to vote, they are more likely to volunteer with a group and help in their community. They have a better understanding of how they might help their child be successful, and they plan to be more engaged in their child's schoolwork over the next year. So a parent-focused approach with culturally affirming parent engagement is really allowing that parent voice to be front and center and finding ways that we can work together. And I believe that with the work that we have done at the Freedom School over these years and in the community, we are going to continue to find ways to affirm parents and families and continue to find ways that we can be partners in our community and with our school district. Thank you.
Dr. Danny Parker-Moore, we thank you for that tremendous presentation on the powerful work of Freedom Schools, which expanded this summer to over 9 sites and is a model that we plan to continue to promote and to partner with as an organization. Dr. Dawn Henderson X from the Village of Wisdom is going to come right now to explain to us a little bit about the framework of the Village of Wisdom and why it is such a powerful concept for us to have in mind as we move forward with this work. Before she starts, I do want to acknowledge our superintendent, Dr. Tricia McManus, who is watching with us tonight, as well as our school board chair, Ms. Melisha Woodbury. If you would, Dr. Dawn Henderson X.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Ford. I appreciate you all. Just to give you a full context of my name is Dawn X Henderson. I hold on to the X because it's actually a name, a middle initial that my father gave me when I was born. My father was a member of the Black National Movement in New Jersey. And so all of his children have X as our middle name. So I do want to acknowledge where that X sits in my name. I'm going to actually open up with a poem that sits on Village of Wisdom's website. You can find it under research in the Dream Assessment Report that was co-led and co-authored by Black parents, and more specifically, Black parent researchers. What happens when dreams are no longer deferred? Do they spring like the blossoms and reach for the sun? Or do they shine brighter than anyone? Do they ignite gifts, talents, or inspire the gallant? Do dreams urge children to soar, move crowds to roar? Maybe they let the lie of you can't erode and they explode. I ask us to sit in a place of reflection as we had to listen to the beautiful words of that student, Christina Reed, because she was talking about her dreams. So what happens when we don't allow system to defer the dreams of young children like Christina? So Village of Wisdom was established in 2014 as a community-driven nonprofit organization whose place exists in Durham, North Carolina. We were established to cultivate and protect the idea of Black genius. And Village of Wisdom began this work by activating the wisdom and the dreams of Black caregivers, Black parents, and the dreams that they held for their Black children. You see, no one dared to ask Black caregivers and parents. Schools were not asking them, what do you dream of? What do you envision of when you think about the learning conditions and environments for your Black children? But I believe that Val was courageous enough and committed enough to start there. You see, we know that too often Black parents report encountering school personnel that discredit them, that mistreat them, that wants to interrogate them, the practices they use at home, the ones who whisper, oh, they don't care about education. But Val knew that Black parents cared about education. And they began this work by listening and listening deeply, by offering a culture of care, by affirming and honoring the long history of Black folks in this country, fighting for freedom and equity and liberation. And through that deep listening, Val developed something called the Black Genius Framework. And in the Black Genius Framework, we outline 6 elements. 6 elements that we believe that when you do this in learning environments for Black learners, whether they are children or our parents themselves, then we know that they are able to thrive. So again, those elements were designed into something called selective trust. So as we know, learning cannot happen if someone doesn't trust the person who is giving them or conveying that learning. That we have to cultivate trust within our communities, across our relationships. We recognize that it is important that learning has to be connected to your interests, those things that you find meaning in. But it has to be connected to the idea of racial pride and affirmation. What does it mean, as Christina talked about, for our young children to see Black folks as scientists, as mathematicians, as leaders? What does it do for them when they can see these dreams manifest into a reality? We talked about the can-do attitude, an element of can-do attitude, when so often we hear in our system the idea that you can't. We lifted up the element of what we call multicultural navigation. So why it is essential for all learners and Black learners to be able to navigate these different settings, these expectations, still with their Black pride intact. And last but not least, we talk about the element of social justice. And as you all alluded, I think Ricky alluded to in his PowerPoint slide, we can connect justice to advocacy. Or maybe we should even challenge the idea of social justice and talk about transformative justice. So we need to dream, because I always say this even within Val. We need to dream because our ancestors dreamed. Whether your ancestors were indigenous, whether your ancestors were Chicano, Mexican, or enslaved African people, they dreamed of us, for us to be here today. So we have to honor the dreams of those who came before us. And I like to believe that Black children need to dream. Black parents need to dream. Caregivers of Black children, teachers who teach Black children need to dream, but more importantly, the dreams need to turn into actions and addressing, as Ricky alluded to, systems change. Because it is only our capacity to translate dreams into actions can we disrupt systems of oppression. So at Village of Wisdom, we have a model called a dream assessment. And we frame that in the idea of dream first. Use those dreams to propel and empower and activate the power within our parents and caregivers to sit beside us, to co-lead us, to guide us in what we call community-driven research. Because we like to believe that community-driven research is about community driving the questions, driving the methods we use, driving the actions we need to take. And I like to argue that when we take a community-driven approach, we're not asking anymore about how racism impacts our community. We're not asking anymore about how poverty affects our community. When community are driving solutions, they are solutions. There are no more inquiries and perspectives about what it is and what does it look like. It is driven from, we want solutions in our community. We need tools in our community. We need programs in our community. We need resources in our community to disrupt and challenge the very systems that tell us our children are not allowed to dream. So I am thankful for being invited into this space. I am thankful that Village of Wisdom is walking in community with action for equity. And I invite you all and encourage you all to keep dreaming. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dawn X. How do we unleash the dreams in our children? And what, if we are honest with ourselves, are we doing to discourage the dreamers among us and among our young people? These are the questions that will captivate us as we move forward, and that will, I believe, really embolden us as we seek to reverse a long-standing trajectory of inequity in our school system. So thank you for those mighty words, inspiring words that you have shared with us to really cast a vision as we think about the why and the what of what we are doing. We are blessed to have Karen Cuthrell here tonight, who is going to talk a bit about nourishing for Forsyth. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Good. I normally don't do this. I normally have a Mendez here with me, but I'm dreaming tonight that I'm going to get through this by myself. You know how powerful to be here tonight and just listening to our speakers before me. And the dream, you know, I had a dream when I first came here that we were going to make Winston-Salem the most emotionally intelligent city in America. And that was years ago. So I've been talking about emotional intelligence, social emotional learning for a long time. And now, as we're beginning, I'm seeing the dream coming true. I'm seeing it coming true. And so let's just go with Nourish and Forsyth, who we are. We are a system change, community-driven, trauma-informed, social and emotional learning campaign designed to produce a more emotionally intelligent Forsyth County. That's who we are. It begins with emotional intelligence. And so that's why we took the word nourish. Nourish means to add substance for growth, health, and goodness. And the opposite of nourishment is starving. And that's what we don't want to happen in our county. We do not want to starve. We want to nourish. And so what is emotional intelligence? We found in a lot of places Forsyth County is lacking it. You know, I just tell it like it is. If don't get angry, don't get upset. I just put the truth on the table. We're lacking a lot of emotional intelligence because it's to be aware and control one's emotions and how to do that with empathy. And so emotional intelligence is the key to both personal and professional success. And so what is social emotional learning? There's that wonderful castle wheel. Basically, you break it down as how to identify, express, and manage our feelings and put it together so that we maintain supportive relationships and make responsible decisions. That's social emotional learning. And so the food for the day, Kelly gave me these questions. You know, why do we need to nourish our school communities? And why do we need to nourish Forsyth? These were very easy for me to answer because we're living them every day. We're seeing them. Why do we need to nourish our school communities? So that educators can thrive. Our educators are hurting now. Our educators need the tools and the resources. So to do this, we need to support staff, adult SEL. And when I mean educators, I mean everyone that touches a child has the privilege of being with the child. We need to provide resources and tools to cultivate and practice social emotional learning in our schools. We need to do it now. We need to develop the capacity for supporting social emotional learning in peers, students, and our families. That is why we need to nourish school communities. Why do we need to nourish school communities? So that our students can thrive. Our students, some are thriving and some are not. And we need to bring a balance to this. And so at SEL, it leads, improves outcomes, academic outcomes and behaviors. It benefits long-term and global, and it's a wild financial investment, and it improves lifetime outcomes. I can only imagine if someone had given me social emotional skills when I was coming through. Listen to these skills: Easton, Mebane, Brunson, Dalton, Kennedy, West Forsyth, and Parkland. Back then, we were changing schools every 2 years. I needed social and emotional learning skills just to survive in those times in the 70s. And so why do we need to nourish Forsyth County? So that our parents and the citizens are healthy, trauma-informed, and emotionally intelligent Forsyth County residents. It sounds simple, but there are barriers for us. There are barriers. And so they're determinants of health that are barriers. There's individual violence, institutional violence, community violence, systemic violence, and structural violence that makes it so that we do not succeed in emotional intelligence. And so let's look at institutional violence. And it's the normalization. And I picked this one out so we clearly understand the normalization of institutional sanctioned practices that promote structural oppression. I'm just going to go through these, and if this applies to you, just say that's me. Community violence, exposure to intentional acts of interpersonal violence, such as public shootings, sexual assaults, bullying, gang violence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Systemic violence can occur when those in authority limit the potential of oppressed communities unconsciously or consciously. and structural violence. We perpetrate inequity through ableism, ageism, classism, elitism, ethnocentrism, nationalism, racism, sexism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when you put all of that on top of that individual in our county, and some of us in the county have all of that on top of us, how do we succeed? That's a lot of pressure to be on one person in this county. There's a lot of pressure on me. I know where my rings are, and I've experienced a lot of these here. So how does it manifest itself? I went to research. I'm a researcher. What's good about Winston-Salem? I went to a site of uphomes.com. When it's about food, Moselle's Village Juice, Mojito, Spring House, The Porch, Jeffrey Adams, Local 2701. Not one Black restaurant or an African-American restaurant listed there. What's good about the food in Forsyth County? What's good about the educational attractions? Wake Forest, we kind of got this in Forsyth Tech. Carolina, Winston-Salem, Carolina Christian University, North Carolina. We kind of got this. We promote education on the college level, so we did real good on that. But when it comes to what's good about sports attractions, Wake Forest, Truist, Winston-Salem Dash, what happened to Winston-Salem State? Where are those Rams? What happened to Pop Warner football? Where are they on this sheet? Not there. What's good about community attractions? The Greek Festival, Idea City, Artists Thrive, Mixer, Taste Carolina, Winston-Salem, Quarry Park. We have the Black Theater Festival. We have Juneteenth, didn't make the list. Think about those systemic things that I was talking about. So when you look at the attraction and what's good about Winston-Salem, out of that, 20 were left of 52 and only 2 took place right of 52. I will say it again, 20 take place left of 52, 2 right of 52, 52 still divides. It divided when I was growing up and it still divides now. And so why do we need to nourish our school communities? And why do we need to nourish Forsyth? Because if we don't, and these are not my answers, I did a poll, a survey. This is what people are saying. When we don't nourish our school communities and we don't nourish Forsyth, schools, fightings, shootings, mall shootings, community shootings, countywide murders. If you're born in poverty, you remain in poverty. Politics as usual. Lack of funding for marginalized entrepreneurs. School as usual. Schools are reactive rather than preventative. Children charged as adults when their brain does not develop until they're 25 years old. Why do we need to nourish our school communities? Why do we need to nourish Forsyth? So that we can look at this list and make this list a thing of the past and not our future. We're nourishing Forsyth, brought together by Forsyth Family Power, the Feelings Company, and Action for Equity. Thank you for being here tonight, and may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight.
Amen, amen, amen. Thank you, Sister Cutthroat, for that. You will hear a lot about trauma-informed and trauma-resilient communities coming from the work that Action for Equity is partnering with around this community. As we consider the tragic circumstances of the violence that we have suffered and endured in recent weeks and months, that must be at the forefront of how we look at rebounding from this, but also creating a community where this sort of thing does not continue. Before we get too far from it, I do want to let you know that the Village of Wisdom, that whole way of approaching this, is the framework as we go forward with Forsyth Family Power. We are going to have parent researchers who are part of this, and Dr. Danny Parker Moore and Brother Ricky Johnson will be helping to lead that research. I said early on tonight that when we made the transition from focusing solely on Ashley to the larger inequities, we never imagined we would get this far, this fast. But we have never forgotten about Ashley. And the truth is that the Action for Ashley campaign still continues because a new Ashley school has not yet been built. And so we are going to hear an update on the situation with Ashley. Brother Marcus Pollard from the Southern Coalition for Social Justice is going to give us an update from SCSJ on where things stand with the legal action that was opened up relative to Ashley a few years ago. Go ahead, brother.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for having me here tonight. And I will jump into an update on Ashley, but first I want to really give you all a state of the schools in Forsyth County and a state of Forsyth County and what the students there are really up against. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly and go through it. All right, so like I said, my name is Marcus Pollard. I'm a staff attorney with the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, and I'm just feeling blessed, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Just from the dynamic speakers that I've heard and the movement in this community and the power and the passion that this community exudes. The reason I'm here really is to do what SCSJ does, right? So we are a legal nonprofit and we provide legal and capacity building resources to nonprofits and grassroots movements. Primarily, we work on ending the school to prison pipeline. So that's why we're here. And tonight, I really want to speak on, and let's see if I can pull up. Yes, I really want to speak on the state of education in Forsyth County, as well as culturally affirming restorative justice practices in our schools, right? So in other words, how do we make our schools more just? How do we make our schools just for, not just for white students, but including all students, right? Just for students of color, just for students who have been historically disadvantaged throughout our history, especially in our school system. So what we do when we first go into a school or a county, we figure out what the injustice looks like, right? And we name it, right? So we try to create an equitable learning environment, which is decriminalizing youth behavior, right? And providing resources for all youth to succeed, right? So when we say that decriminalizing youth behavior, there are a lot of things that youth go to jail for, get arrested for, suspended for, that really could have been counseled, that really could have been, resolved without removing that student from the classroom, removing that student from the school. So that's what we really work on. And the fact is that we look at when we're trying to figure out, okay, what would make this area more equitable? We look at the demographic of the students. We look at the demographic of the staff. We look at the disciplinary data. And then we look at the budget analysis. We look at where the money's going, right? We look at the allocation of the money. And when we did a dive into Forsyth County and Winston-Salem schools to see about educational justice, we saw that a lot of the schools are not performing well when it comes to academics, their math, their reading. And we saw that 28 out of the 71 schools that reported were underperforming, right? And we did more of a dive, right? We wanted to see, okay, if these two schools aren't performing well, who are they? What does the population look like? And we actually saw that you can draw lines, right? You can draw lines and correlations between a student that goes to a school that's predominantly Black or predominantly Latinx and a school that is predominantly low income, right? And show that those are the schools that are failing. Those are the schools that are predominantly students of color and low income are the schools that are failing. So we saw it. The 8 schools that were reported that were failing, here's the numbers, all right? So Ashley Academy they're 60% Black. 83% report economic hardships are coming in up under the poverty line. And it goes right down the line with the rest of the schools. It's a direct correlation. And that's what we talk about when we say economic, that's what we talk about when we say educational justice in the school system. How can we make this injustice just? How can we make it so that you can't look at a school, look at their demographics as far as race, as far as income, and determine whether that school is going to be successful or not? Likewise, we looked at the suspensions and the expulsion rates in these schools, and it was right along the lines of race, right? So you have data taken from the 2017-2018 school year survey showed that in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, Black students made up only 28% of the county's enrollment, but they have 51% of the in-school suspensions, 55% of the out-of-school suspensions, 61% of the expulsions. Likewise, Hispanic students made up 26% of overall population, but 25% for the in-school suspension, 24% of the out-of-school suspension, and 20% of the expulsions. Their white counterparts that made up 38% of the population, they came in with numbers at 17, 14, and 11. So we're seeing that students of color are not only being disadvantaged when it comes to classroom performance, but they're also being over-policed in schools. And I'm gonna get to why Southern Coalition and JSR feels that they are coming in underperforming. That's gonna be part of our solutions, because we're also a solution-oriented organization. But I just wanna really give you the numbers first, right? Like Ricky said, what does the data say, right? We have to present and tell what the data says, but there is also solutions that we want to present. So, but the numbers are flipped, right? So if you look at the number of AP courses, the number of IB courses is flipped for Hispanic and white students and Black students, right? So you have, what is it? Almost 70% of white students enrolled in advanced placement courses, while 11% and 10% of Black students are. It's a little higher for Black students and Hispanic students when it comes to IB courses, but their numbers are still dwarfed by those of the of their white counterparts. And you can, I left this here, right? Because it's an actual inverse, almost completely flipped from the expulsions and the enrollments and advanced placement courses that you need for college, that you need to be prepared for college. And here's the overall enrollment. I thought that was important to keep there as well. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a culturally affirming restorative justice environment for these schools, and creating a school environment that repairs the harms caused by racial and economic injustices and biases, right? So given this data, we target different problems and draft possible solutions to the problems. We call this restorative justice, or attacking the root issues of the problem instead of policing people of color and policing low-income families. We drafted a policy document. I don't know if you all had a chance to look over the document. We made it public yesterday, so we will be shopping it around to different elected officials, county commissioners, Board of Education members, and really having these policy demands as solutions to the issues and the problems that we've seen in this county. I didn't pull out every demand from that policy platform, but I did pull out some demands that I felt were really vital to a cultural affirming environment and for South County and Winston-Salem schools. And the first one is implementing a culturally affirming curriculum. The second one is hiring a more diverse staff. That's what we're asking for going forward in the future. The third is creating a trauma-informed school. And the last one is an equitable budget allocation. And that just goes right back around to where we started with Ashley, right? Ashley still hasn't been built. The money to build Ashley still hasn't been allocated. And we also saw that budget allocations for this county and for this school district go along with racial and economic lines, which is also a huge problem. So, yeah, so a culturally responsive curriculum means using cultural knowledge. I'm sorry, I have my on my screen. So it means using cultural knowledge, prior experiences, and performance styles for students of color to make learning encounters more relevant and effective. Research indicates that culturally responsive practices improve both academic performances and well-being for students. Students who participate in culturally responsive learning environments have a greater interest in school and are more motivated to learn. However, according to the district course catalog, students' first chance to take an African American or Latinx studies classes in 11th grade. It is not mandatory, it's not required. We're asking that to be taught sooner to every student and making that required. Because I think, like Ms. Reed has said earlier, she would love to learn about more or take more African American studies courses, but that's just not required or it's not given to her or made available to her until the 11th grade. Likewise, in the 2018-2019 school year, 65% of Black students and 57% of Latinx students were below proficiency in math as compared to white students who were below proficiency, 24% below proficiency. White students also fared better when it came to reading with only 10% below proficiency as compared to their Black and brown counterparts at 37 and 38%. We're saying that this is necessary to increase the engagement and increase the interest of Black and brown students. A culturally affirming curriculum to grab kids early in elementary school and middle school, to grab their interest early in order to pique the interest moving forward. If you lose students early, they'll be playing catch up later on. So we're asking, or not even asking, but we're demanding for the implementation of a culturally relevant or culturally affirming curriculum. Secondly, we're asking for or demanding to hire a diverse faculty and staff, right? A study from Johns Hopkins shows that students of color who had at least one teacher of color in elementary school were significantly more likely to graduate high school and consider going to college. However, in the 2018-2019 data collection presented to Governor Cooper, it shows that 79% of the state's teachers were white, while only 47% of the state students were white. And Winston-Salem for South County is worse. 76% of the population is white teachers, only 23% is Black. So with this data, a student can actually go from K through 12 without ever having a Black teacher. A Black student, a student of color can actually go from K through 12 without ever having seen a Black educator in front of them. And we know it's not from our studies, it's the studies from Johns Hopkins that this matters. Having someone that looks like you're in front of the classroom teaching you in ways that you're used to being taught, it matters. So we're demanding that this actually be changed too in the school system in the county. Next, we want a trauma-informed school in which students are prepared with impact stressors to respond in a way that creates culture and respects the respect and support, right? So we know that trauma stems from various circumstances beyond acute trauma, such as the exposure to things like economic hardship. Considering like the fact that the student that you're teaching comes from a low-income area, comes from a low-income family. Currently, Forsyth County has the third lowest rate of or economic mobility in the United States. So I think, and we believe that having an increased presence of counselors, psychologists, and social workers in schools to deal with the traumas, not only of being a student of color, but also being a student of color that's dealing with day-to-day impacts of economic hardship is important. Schools can play an important role in addressing the effects of traumatic stress on students by providing prevention, early intervention, and treatment. Lastly, we can't forget about Ashley, and that's why that's why I'm here. But that's not why we're gonna move forward, right? We have a lot of things moving forward that we want to work on, but Ashley still hasn't been built, and you can't look past the demographic of Ashley as compared to its counterparts that have new buildings, right? So Ashley, 90% student body, student of color, excuse me. And they got approved for $1.8 million to repair a HVAC system, HVAC system. They got approved for $900,000 for a building design in the future. Like, not in this budget referendum, but in a few years from now, we'll have $900,000 to maybe design in Ashley, right? But Southeast Middle, they didn't get a new school, but Smith Farm was built to relieve pressure from Southeast Middle, right? That was $26 million. It's not to be looked over that school is 40% white. East Forsyth High also got a new building to the tune of $22 million, but it's not to be looked over that school was also 55% white. So we are moving forward on different things because we were brought here from a lawsuit, right? So my organization, a few years ago, filed a lawsuit with the Office of Civil Rights for Ashley, and that lawsuit is still ongoing. It's not something that has stopped. It's not something that we've forgotten about. We check on it every day. But truth be told, that office hasn't been gutted, but funding for that office has been diminished or has been reduced in the last couple of years. The Office of Civil Rights hasn't been receiving as much funding as it would have in previous years. So they went from 4 or 5 attorneys to 1 attorney working on the investigation. So there's still an investigation process. However, me and my team of attorneys, we're here to continue the process. That lawsuit is still being filed. That lawsuit is still being investigated, but we're moving forward on implementing policies for Ashley now, implementing policies for Forsyth County and Winston-Salem now, right? So there's 2 things going on. We're still investigating the civil rights complaint that was filed, but we're also moving forward with the policies now to put political pressure on Ashley, to put political pressure on the Winston-Salem Forsyth County School District. And with that, I will give controls back to the moderator.
Brother Pollard, thank you so much for that comprehensive presentation. 2 things that I want to note relative to some of what you shared tonight. In the midst of the debate a few years ago about whether or not there should be a requirement for a course in African-American history that all students have to take before they left high school, A4E took the stance that what we wanted to see with the cultural infusion curriculum that has already been designed, already been in place for many years, K through 12, fully implemented. And while there has been some progress made, there is still much further to go. And so we are still looking towards that. In addition to that, as we are talking about the school to prison pipeline, I am glad to report that the social justice partnership has been bringing together representation from the schools, from the criminal justice system, from the courts. I've been representing A4E there. We've been working together to try to cut off the school to prison pipeline by looking at how we can reevaluate the way that we are doing school discipline, and the code of conduct resolution has already been presented to the school board. So there is progress being made there as well. But what you're going to hear here is, at best, we've got progress, but we've still got further to go. And that is why all of the work that Ashley is involved in is so important. Going to bring back Pretty Ricky. I hope you still got that blue bow tie on, and tell us very quickly about advancing the fight for a new Ashley school.
Okay. So just a few quick updates that we got from the district. So they have purchased the land for Ashley. I don't know specifically where that land is located or how much they spent on the land to buy it. They have been pushing to get the design of the school move from 2023 to 2021 to happen before the end of the year. Lastly, they are pushing to lobby at the state level to get money allocated from the state to help get Ashley build on the basis of the socioeconomics of the school, as well as the achievement gap. And I believe they'll also be applying for grants. And I also want to say, as Reverend Ford mentioned earlier, that, you know, although we have moved in name from Action for Ashley to Action for Equity, you know, the Ashley is at the center of our work. So it hasn't gone anywhere when it comes to our policy agenda, and I'll go over our demands in a few seconds. Ashley is at the center, but what we've learned in that fight is that the issues around the inequities that are happening at Ashley are not isolated to Ashley. So we know that those issues are symptoms of the larger problems that the school system needs to seriously address, because we know, as Brother Marcus indicated, that if this was students of a different race, different class, and different political power, the school system would move a lot quicker. And we do have historical evidence of that. If you just look at a few years ago with Haynes Lawrence and how quickly they moved those students out of school. When it comes to our policy demands, we have 8 of them. So first, we want to push for and demand culturally affirming curriculums, as addressed earlier, and school learning environments. Next, we want the hiring of a more diverse staff, and think the demographics, of course. Think Brother Marcus mentioned some. So we have, I think, 38% white students. The teaching force, 76% white, which contributes to a lot of the issues, in my opinion, of what we have going on. I mean, I don't know what's going on with the recruitment, but you know, we do have 12 HBCUs in the state of North Carolina, one of which is, of course, down the street, used to be named Winston-Salem Teachers College. So we definitely need to do some recruitment around Black and brown educators. Next, we want serious family engagement, because as a few people said earlier, we need to be more proactive and preventative, and that can't happen if we aren't seriously engaged with the families and the community. Next, we want to eliminate the achievement gap. We know the school system is pushing 90 by 25. But again, going back to, you know, the racial demographics, had those been white students performing the way Black students are currently, that probably would happen 90 by 21, the end of 21. Next, we want equitable funding district-wide, which will address a lot of issues and chip at solving. Next, we want to enhance, of course, going back to looking at Ashley, we want to enhance the air quality across the district, specifically schools that are Title I and Black and brown that have more issues than those other schools. Next, we want to end, as Brother Marcus went extensively on, we want to end exclusionary, disciplinary, or discipline and disciplinary policy, because that is a policy issue that the school system needs to address and create a new policy. Last demand, we want to ensure that the educators, the personnel has support when it comes to teaching and learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ricky. We are running short on time, and we're mindful of that as the evening grows late. but we are going to hear from Dr. Ed Bell, who is to Action for Equity what Professor X was to the X-Men. And so he has a presentation on Latham Diggs and evidence-based practices, looking at Latham Diggs as a case study. Dr. Bell is going to make his presentation, and then we are going prepared to draw things to a close for this evening. We've got a couple of questions that have been placed in the Q&A. I do encourage our panelists to engage those. We also want to encourage those of you who are watching, if you have additional questions, to go ahead and put those in the Q&A as Dr. Bell is making his presentation. And if we can't answer them all this evening, we will do our best to follow up with folks as we go forward. Dr. Bell?
Okay, thank you. This is a presentation of a case study that was done at Latham Elementary School. It was published in the Journal of Urban Education in 2007. And then later it was published again in Europe. The interesting thing about it, although it was published nationally and internationally, the study has never been replicated in the Winston-Salem, Forsyth County schools. The background of the school is a Title I school, 60% Black, 20% Black Latino, 20% white. The Title I means it's a low income, high ethnic school. They predicted that 45% of the student population would perform at grade level or below. In the action research, the independent variable was collaborative grade level planning, research, decision-making, and transformational leadership. The dependent variable was, of course, the student performance on end of grade test. Next slide, please. Now, the intervening variables, and we'll see them later, were the teachers, students, families, the community, Project Child, that was the computer system the school used, and the administrative team. Now, the community was particularly important. Business leaders provided funds for Project Child, and the men of the sci-fi chapter of Omega Sci-Fi Incorporated provided tutors who worked with 30 level 1 students during the 2001-2002 year. Now, level 1 is the lowest level of student performance. Next slide, please. Now, this is the logic model of the Latham Way. You can see in purple on the bottom the intervening variables. You can see yellow in the middle of the factors that were affected, like the teachers, the family. And then another purple oval on the left is the student performance on the teacher's test. That is what the state measured. Next slide, please. Okay, collaborative planning. The teachers worked in a collaborative grade level teams, not each individual teachers, but everyone in the 5th grade, everyone in the 4th grade worked together and developed personalized plans for each of the students in their individual classrooms. And they monitored and reviewed how those students did together. Next slide, please. The research-based decision-making, I think we skipped one. Okay, research-based decision-making, they only use instructional strategies that had a strong research base. And if something didn't work effectively for a grading period, it was changed and substituted, even if it was the principal's personal preference. Next slide, please. This may have been the most important factor, transformational leadership. The leadership of the school changed the way the teachers, the students, and the parents thought about themselves and one another. They treated one another differently. The students believed, despite their history, that they could be successful. Next slide, please. And of course, student performance, the end of grade test in reading and mathematics. That's the end all and be all in North Carolina. Next slide. Now the results. Latham Elementary tested 120 students in the end of grade test in 2002. Remember, the state expected 45% to be at or above grade level. All right. Next slide. The composite score was 83% at grade level or above. All 30 of the students who were at level 1 performed at level 3, which is the acceptable level. These are the people who had all the quote unquote deficits that indicated they could not perform. And this is how they did actually perform. Next slide, please. This research-based initiative changed the normative culture of the school, and this is critical, in 6 ways. They continually evaluated the instructional strategies. Things that didn't work were discarded. They provided personal educational programs for every child that were collaboratively developed and monitored by groups of teachers, not just one teacher. They were committed to the continued growth of the education staff and parents, and the constant focus on the improvement of student performance. Next slide. Using frequent assessment and data analysis to guide instruction and focus on problem areas. They didn't just wait until grades. They maintained continual two-way communication with all the stakeholders. That's the business people who provided the funding, the people who provided support for Project Child, the tutors and mentors for the students, and most critically, the parents. They redesigned the structure and flow of the delivery of the curriculum. These 6 strategies expanded the boundaries on the school so that it has become a motivating force in creating a true membership in an outstanding family, school, community partnership. Thank you.
Dr. Bell, thank you. Thank you. Did you want to read this last, that last slide there?
Well, okay, I'll read it. Okay. I want you to understand how long we've known how to do this. Okay. This was published in 1979. There has never been a time in the life of the American public schools when we have not known all we needed to in order to teach all those whom we chose to teach. The point is, how do we feel about the fact that we haven't yet? Thank you.
That's it, Doc. And that points us to the critical issue, folks. It's not a question of whether or not we know how to do what we need to do. It's not a question of whether or not we have the research, whether or not we have the evidence. It's a question of whether or not we have the public will and whether or not we are able to leverage that public will in order to get the results that we need. This is why we talked about Leandro tonight. This is why we've talked about Forsyth Family Power. This is why we've talked about the ongoing battle, both via legal means as well as others in regards to the Ashley School. This is why we've talked about the Village of Wisdom. This is why we have talked about emotional intelligence and building a trauma-resilient community. because we have the information that we need. We simply have to bring it all together and put it to work and have the will of those from the grass tops, the grassroots, in order to get it done. So, Brother Pollard, I'm going to ask you to do this Vote Consciously in 2022 in about a minute and a half, if you can, so that we can move quickly towards a wrap here.
I can do it faster than that.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Because, I mean, when you talk about voting consciously, there was a question in the chat that asked, why do we need a lawsuit? And we don't need a lawsuit. I'm not here because of a lawsuit. We filed a lawsuit to put pressure. I could do a lawsuit from a courtroom in Durham, Raleigh. I'm here on this call tonight to harness and to galvanize and motivate and put things like trauma-informed school systems on the ballot. I'm here tonight to try to put family engagement on the ballot, because voting a lawsuit is just one way to force your lawmakers and your elected officials to do something you want to do. But the easiest way is to harness the power to vote. And we're here, Southern Coalition, JSR, we're here to make your elected officials have to answer these tough questions, to make them have to answer why certain schools are failing, why certain schools haven't gotten the funding, why do we not have more Black teachers. So we're here to harness the power to vote, because it doesn't take a lawsuit. All it takes is a vote. Like it was said by the Reverend, we have the information. We just need to harness that, harness the people power, harness the voting power, and move forward and make these politicians, elected officials, represent you or go. So that's why we're here. It doesn't take a lawsuit. We can vote. We know how to do it. Let's get it done.
Thank you so much. Dr. Bell, do you want to speak to the question that was just asked by Trina Stevens? Since this was so successful, why wasn't it replicated in other schools in terms of the Latham way? I did want to give you just a brief minute to address that, because I think it ties into everything Brother Pollard and I were just saying.
I have my suspicions, but the conclusion I reached is that other things were considered more important.
Okay. So it has to be a priority, right? Equity has to be a priority, and moving expeditiously towards equity has to be a priority. The Leandro case makes it a priority because, as I have said numerous times in our board meetings, this judge is essentially threatening to put North Carolina state schools in receivership if the legislature does not do their job. So as you leave from this webinar tonight, we are so grateful for all of those who made presentations on this evening, for your power, for your sense of passion, for your sense of bold vision. Contact your state representatives, contact your state senators about the Leandro case. Ask them what they are doing to address constitutionally obligated levels of funding for our schools all across the state. To our anti-racist allies and accomplices, we need you to sign up for our mailing list. We need you to make contributions to continue to support the work of Action for Equity. To our Black and brown parents watching tonight, we need you to be a part of Forsyth Family Power, to be a part of this grassroots power, parent empowerment initiative that is going to be such a focus of our work moving forward. And we need you to be aware of and supportive of the work of the Women's Gun Violence Prevention Team, as we consider the fundamental promise of equity that every child should be able to go safely to and from school and be safe in that school. We know the work that our superintendent has announced on that, and Sheriff Kimbrough and and Chief Thompson and others. But we also know that there's going to take this deeper community change, cultural change in our neighborhoods, in our communities, dealing with issues of equity and poverty and ACEs and all of the trauma-informed ways that we have to be thinking about the conditions of our communities that lead to this sort of deadly violence. The Women's Gun Violence Prevention Team is pulling together folks who have been working on the ground on this for years and leveraging that insight and that know-how, because there again, we know what works. We simply have to have the will to do it and to push it forward. With that, brothers and sisters, I want to thank all of our staff from Action for Equity, Kelly Easton, our ED, Kenneth Reed, Mary Pat Thomas, Pretty Ricky Johnson, our board members as well. We thank you all for joining us. We love you all. Stay in the fight, stay in the battle, and let's keep pressing on for the sake of our kids. Y'all have a good evening.
Thank you.